Hello and welcome back. Today we're diving into La Llorona and why this is not just another crying ghost story, but one of the most durable warning legends in the Americas. You're walking home past an empty canal at midnight. Streetlight buzzing, water barely moving, no cars, no people. Then you hear a woman crying. Not movie crying, not dramatic, real crying. The kind that sounds broken. The kind that makes your brain do that dumb, heroic thing where it goes, maybe someone needs help. Then the second thought hits. Why is she out here alone, next to water, in the middle of the night? And why does everybody's grandma from Mexico to the American Southwest basically agree that this is the exact situation where you should turn around and absolutely not investigate? That is La Llorona. And the real story is worse than the meme version, because she is not just ghost lady who screams near a river. She is a warning for children, a threat to men, a nightmare about motherhood and guilt, and in many tellings, a legend shaped by both indigenous belief and colonial trauma. That is why she lasted. La Llorona usually gets translated as the weeping woman or the wailing woman, and that already tells you the whole vibe. She is known across Mexican and Latin American oral tradition, with many versions also circulating in the American Southwest and Chicano communities. The details change a lot, but the core image does not. A woman crying in the night, often near water, often tied to dead or lost children, and always, always bad news. That matters, because durable legends survive by keeping the silhouette simple. You do not need a full lore wiki to understand La Llorona. You need a dark road, water nearby, and a cry that sounds wrong. Same reason the empty canal at midnight works. Your brain fills in the rest before your logic even gets its shoes on. Here is the first thing people flatten online. There is no single official La Llorona plot. Britannica, the Library of Congress, and Smithsonian materials all note major variation. In many versions, she was a woman named Maria who drowned her children in rage, jealousy, grief, or despair, and is condemned to wander searching for them. In other versions, the children drown accidentally. In others, she mainly kidnaps children, threatens mothers, seduces or attacks lone men, or appears simply as a deadly omen. Some stories focus on how she died. Others skip that and go straight to the encounter. So when somebody says La Llorona is exactly this one backstory, that is already too neat. Folklore hates neatness. Folklore is more like a playlist with the same chorus and wildly different verses. The chorus here is grief, water, children, and danger. The rest changes depending on place, family, and what the story needs to warn you about. The cry is a huge part of why the legend sticks. In many tellings, she is heard before she is seen, and hearing her is itself dangerous. Britannica notes one especially nasty detail found in some versions. Her cries can sound farther away the closer she really is. That is perfect nightmare design. Your ears tell you one thing, the danger is another, and now even distance cannot be trusted. That is why the empty canal at midnight is such a good running image for her. You hear crying on the other side of the water, maybe under the bridge, maybe near the reeds, maybe from the concrete storm drain where nobody should be standing. And now your brain has to choose between empathy and self-preservation. Legends love that trap. Humans do not. One of the most consistent social jobs of the story is brutally practical. Keep children from wandering around at night or near bodies of water. Britannica says many versions are told to children across Latin America to stop them from staying out late, and Smithsonian and the National Museum of American History both note that the legend is widely repeated to children throughout Latin America and the American Southwest. Library of Congress material also includes personal memories of being warned to hurry home before La Llorona got near. And honestly, from a parent or grandparent perspective, this is disturbingly efficient. Please be careful near the river is good. A weeping dead woman will drag you into the water if you stay out after dark is unforgettable. One is safety advice. The other installs itself in your nervous system. If you grow up near irrigation ditches, canals, flood channels, creeks, or riverbanks, the story basically weaponizes the landscape for your own survival. But La Llorona is not only for kids. Library of Congress material makes clear that some versions target solitary men, especially men traveling alone at night, where she may appear as a pitiful or attractive woman and then reveal something monstrous. Britannica also notes versions in which she seduces or murders lone men, sometimes as revenge tied to betrayal or abuse. This is where the legend gets darker than the meme. She is not just a bogey woman for naughty children. She is also a punishment story for adults. A man sees a crying woman on a road, by a river, near a bridge, at the edge of a field, and thinks he is entering a rescue scene or a romance setup. Wrong. He has walked into Folklore's version of bad decision detected. The empty canal at midnight is now not a childhood warning. It is a male overconfidence test. The legend also functions as a warning about motherhood, jealousy, sexuality, social judgment, and what happens when a woman is pushed outside accepted roles. The Library of Congress series discusses how some interpreters see La Llorona as a cautionary figure for the bad mother or bad wife, while Rudolfo Anaya and others also framed her as a victim of harsh sexual and social taboos. In some remembered versions, the point was not simply she was evil, but that she violated a rule, was abandoned or mistreated, and then became both sinner and warning. That is why the legend has real bite. It is not morally clean. If it were just monster kills kids, it would survive as a spooky campfire bit. Instead, it sits in the ugly space where guilt, social shame, betrayal, and violence mix together. People remember that, a lot more than they remember some random goblin in a cave. Historically, the legend as we know it took shape in colonial Mexico, but many scholars and cultural institutions also point to pre-Hispanic roots. Smithsonian's Latino Center says the legend became popular in colonial Mexico from the 16th century onward, while also arguing that it draws on older indigenous female figures. The Library of Congress similarly describes modern La Llorona as a combination of deep indigenous roots and later European or colonial narrative branches. And that makes total sense. Legends do not stay pure. They absorb conquest, religion, class rules, and new fears. So, La Llorona becomes a ghost that can carry older indigenous associations with weeping female spirits and water, while also taking on Spanish Christian ideas about sin, punishment, damnation, and scandal. Basically, the story got remixed by history, and the remix stuck. One major source people point to is Chihuacoatl, an important Mexica or Aztec goddess associated with women, children, and in some texts, a terrifying weeping female presence. The Library of Congress highlights Nahuatl accounts in the Florentine Codex, describing a woman heard weeping in Tenochtitlan before the Spanish conquest, crying for her children and warning of disaster. The same discussion also notes parallels between Cihuacoatl and later La Llorona traditions, including associations with children and night wandering. Now, to keep this clean, that does not mean every scholar agrees La Llorona is simply Cihuacoatl with a new outfit. The safer truth is that many researchers see strong indigenous antecedents, especially around the weeping woman motif, while others emphasize later literary and colonial reshaping. But the pre-Hispanic layer is real enough that you cannot honestly reduce La Llorona to just a Spanish ghost story. At the same time, the Library of Congress also points to European branches in the legend's development. It notes that some biographical origin stories, the woman, the lover, the betrayal, the children, the punishment, look heavily shaped by European narrative models, including white lady ghost traditions and moral tales carried from Spain. The same source argues that La Llorona's current form likely came from indigenous roots, plus later narrative elements introduced from Europe sometime after conquest. So the real answer is not indigenous or Spanish. It is worse and more interesting, both. The legend became durable because it could hold both worlds at once. Indigenous memory, colonial violence, Catholic punishment logic, social shame, child danger, water fear, lone road fear. That is a stacked loadout for one ghost. Some traditions and later retellings identify La Llorona with La Malinche, the indigenous interpreter linked to Hernán Cortés. The National Museum of American History notes that this connection exists in some tellings and in later popular culture, and the Library of Congress discusses it as one of the more complex outgrowths of the legend's evolution. But again, this is not the single true origin. It is one important interpretive strand among several. Why does that version matter? Because now La Llorona is not only a dead mother near water. She becomes entangled with conquest, betrayal, mixed identity, and the nightmare of being remembered as both necessary and unforgivable. That is not meme material. That is historical psychic damage wearing a white dress. The water is not random. It is the perfect setting for a warning legend. Rivers, canals, wells, creeks, lakes, and drainage ditches are all attractive and dangerous, especially for children, and especially at night. The story repeatedly places La Llorona along riverbanks and watersides, and institutions like Britannica and Smithsonian's American History Museum explicitly mention riversides as her classic terrain. And water is already loaded symbolically. It hides bodies, it distorts sound, it reflects light badly, it swallows evidence. It is the opposite of control. So of course, the empty canal at midnight becomes her natural habitat. It looks normal in daylight. At night, it becomes a legend delivery system. Same concrete, entirely different universe. Her appearance also shifts depending on the region and the point of the story. Sometimes she is a woman in white. Sometimes she is veiled. Sometimes she is only heard. Library of Congress material preserves descriptions where she appears as a pitiful woman under a rebozo and then reveals a skeletal face, no face at all, or some other grotesque form. Britannica notes that encounters can end in misfortune or death, and some versions say she steals children when she realizes they are not her own. This is smart folklore design again. The less fixed the face, the more adaptable the fear. She can be the woman near the bridge, the figure near the ditch, the shape under the tree line, the sound under the overpass, the white form by the canal rail. If the legend nails the environment and the cry, the visuals can stay flexible. In several traditions, La Llorona is dangerous to lone men, not because she is a generic female ghost, but because she sits right at the intersection of desire, pity, and risk. A man sees a woman alone on a road or riverbank. He thinks he understands the situation. Then the story punishes him for that assumption. Library of Congress explicitly describes versions where she lures a solitary male late at night before turning monstrous. That hits because it turns common social instincts against the listener. Help her? Bad. Follow the crying? Bad. Approach the woman in white by the water? Catastrophically bad. Folklore loves humiliating human certainty. The guy near the empty canal at midnight thinks he is entering a scene. In the legend, the scene is entering him. The story also lands hard with women and mothers because it is built out of maternal catastrophe. Library of Congress notes that adult women often connect to La Llorona differently from children do, seeing warnings about jealousy, bad choices, social blame, and motherhood, rather than just a monster in the dark. That gives the figure unusual depth for a popular ghost. She is feared, but she is also pitied, judged, reinterpreted, and sometimes reclaimed. That complexity is a big reason the legend lasted. Simple monsters get sequels. Ambiguous monsters get generations. La Llorona did not stay put. The Smithsonian and National Museum of American History note that her story circulates throughout Mexico, Latin America, and the American Southwest, while Britannica highlights her prominence in Chicano communities as well. The Library of Congress even describes her continuing adaptation across languages and places in the United States. And that makes sense too. She travels well because she does not need a castle or an ancient ruin. She needs water, darkness, and memory. A canal behind apartment blocks works. A levee road works. A creek behind a trailer park works. A river under a highway bridge works. A dry wash outside town works. That portability is legendary, literally. The meme version usually turns La Llorona into one of two things. Either she is just a jump scare ghost lady in white, or she is a vague, crying mom demon. Both are lazy. The real legend is worse, because it keeps changing what exactly the danger is. For a child, she is what happens if you wander too far. For a man, she is what happens if you trust the wrong scene. For a mother, she is guilt and social judgment with a supernatural body. For communities shaped by conquest and displacement, she can also carry historical grief. That is why she outlives trends. She is not a one-function monster. She is folklore multitasking at a disgusting level. The Library of Congress quotes scholar Domino René Perez on La Llorona's long endurance in greater Mexican cultural tradition. And that endurance is not hard to understand once you look at what the legend actually does. It teaches, it polices, it mourns, it adapts, it frightens children, it embarrasses reckless men. It gives form to grief. It absorbs colonial history. And because the story has so many variants, every generation can tune it slightly without losing the core. Basically, La Llorona survives for the same reason the empty canal at midnight still works. The environment keeps doing half the storytelling for free. People only have to add the crying woman. That is also why she remains so effective in modern settings. You do not need candles in old churches. Put the legend next to a drainage canal behind a housing estate, a bike path by a river, a retention pond near a freeway, a flood tunnel, an irrigation ditch, an underpass that smells like wet concrete, a culvert in a border town. The story snaps into place instantly because the old fear map still matches the modern world. And the modern listener gets the same ugly choice the old listener got. You hear crying. Do you go closer? Are you a decent person? Or are you about to become a cautionary tale because folklore baited your empathy with perfect timing? Cool. Great system. The real horror is not just that she drowned her children in many versions. It is that the story keeps asking what kind of world creates a figure like this, and then keeps retelling her forever. A world obsessed with punishing women. A world worried about children disappearing near water. A world shaped by conquest, shame, and moral control. A world where grief can become a public warning. That is why La Llorona is worse than the meme. The meme gives you a spooky lady. The legend gives you a haunted social system. So go back to the empty canal at midnight. Streetlight buzzing, water barely moving, no cars, no people. Then you hear a woman crying. Now the scene means 10 things at once. Child danger, water danger, sexual danger, moral danger, historical grief, colonial aftershock, maternal catastrophe, bad decisions in the dark, a ghost, a warning, maybe all of them. That is what durable folklore looks like. It does not just scare you. It loads the environment until the environment itself becomes suspicious. And once that happens, the legend does not need to appear every night. It already moved into the map. So, rapid recap. La Llorona means the weeping woman. She is not one fixed story. Most versions tie her to lost or dead children. Water is her territory for a reason. She was used to warn kids away from danger. She also threatens adults, especially lone men, in some tellings. Her modern form grew through both indigenous and colonial layers. Cihuacoatl is one major pre-Hispanic comparison, not a universally agreed one-to-one origin. Some versions connect her to La Malinche. She carries guilt, shame, grief, and social control all at once. That is why she survived across Mexico, Latin America, and the American Southwest. And that is why hearing crying by water at night still feels like a terrible idea. So the takeaway is simple. La Llorona lasted because she was never just a ghost. She was a warning system, built out of motherhood, danger, and history. So, If you like the video, comment with the creepiest stretch of water near where you grew up, and subscribe if you want more legends that make normal places feel immediately unusable.